My favourite museum in the world is a museum called the House on the Rock, which is in America, and it was the brainchild of the rather eccentric Alex Jordan. It's an enormous collection of collections, and inside you'll find everything from collections of paperweights to collections of church organs, from replica sets of crown jewels to whaling memorabilia, from a recreated small town street to collections of aeroplanes. It's a really weird place. I wrote a collection of poems about it, and I'm going to do all of those poems in this video. It's going to be, therefore, something of a longer set than usual, but all the poems go together. And it starts with a very short introduction. For each poem, I'm not going to give any introductions. I'm just going to read the title and then the poem. The House on the Rock. Come up to the house on the rock. March by to the tick and the tock of the clock. Come to marvel at mysteries or simply to mock, but come none the less to the house on the rock. Enclosed infinity. There is no end to the line, to the infinite, imprisoned, unchanging design that stretches beyond and before and around, between heaven and hell, between sky and ground. There is a world I can see, but the glass holds it separate from me as I press my face hard to the cold and watch the reality as the stories unfold. The vertigo viewpoint succeeds in feeding and watering the paranoid needs, and I think, far away, I hear music that plays, metric and measured, a stately and slow polonaise. Step into the house on the rock, where time does not rule, there's no tick, there's no tock, just the shifting and subtle illusions of shock when you venture inside at the house on the rock. What kind of person would live in a house like this? Was it built? Did it grow? Did it just appear so overnight, one night? Did it spring from the earth? Did the angels give birth to this sight, this delight? There's a taste of the east and a hint of the beast in the gloom of the room. There are shelves filled with books in the crannies and nooks, but for whom do they loom? There are eggs made of stone, there are figures of bone in array on display. There's the sound of a band, but there's no mortal hand here to play for today. There's a Tiffany lamp, but it carries a stamp there to show that it's faux. It's a box of delights, it's a trick of the light, but the glow's getting low. What kind of person would live in a house like this? Who'd dance with the bogeymen down on the sharp precipice? Who'd haul rocks to the top of the mountain and do it by hand, just to see if the mountain would turn out the way that he'd planned? Was it built? Did it grow? Did it just appear so overnight, one night? Did it spring from the earth, or did nature give birth to this sight, this delight? A man stands on the rocks, he's surrounded by flocks of strange birds. It's absurd. All this bric-a-brac shines in 1,000 designs till we're spurred to find words for the things that we've seen here and there and between, but there's more to explore. It's time to be going, and we march on unknowing to the door, the new door. Come back to the house on the rock, to the jewels and the gems and the schlock, to the weird and the wonderful stock. Come back to the house on the rock. A collection of collections. Part 1, Hemispheres. In his house he had a case full of tiny universes, of frozen explosions, of luminescent flowers, of slices of time and spirals of space, all captured in hemispheres of glass. He showed them as a child shows a mayfly, captured in cupped hands, precious and fragile. Eternity trapped in a moment of grace, undying, unchanging, waiting for the world to pass. A collection of collections, Part 2, The Golden Age of Steam. In his house he had a room where motion was caught behind a window in the wall, upon a shelf, where it became forever the golden age of steam, and the liveried engines stood in a trackless waste. He showed them as a young man showed his car, exuberant and boastful. This is mine, this is me. See how I have taken hold of the dream. See how I have tamed and conquered reckless haste. A collection of collections, Part 3, Looking After the Pennies. In his house he had a wall where everything was safe, where the tokens of pecuniary hope were held inside minute houses and animals and heads, inside the tin plate mechanisms of desire. He showed them as an old man shows his treasures, reluctantly, protecting them with the tightest irony. These toys that should be holding are held instead, symbols of acquisition turned into objects to acquire. Come along now through the house on the rock. Praise it in whispers, raise voices to knock. Stare at the strangeness that stands chock-a-block. Come along now through the house on the rock. The Devil's Carousel. I will pass by the mouth of hell. I will not ride this carousel. I will not heed the tolling bell. I will pass by the mouth of hell. Above the circling angels see the carnival that's tempting me, but I remain apart and free while still the circling angels see. The fabulous fantastic wheel turns and turns to still reveal monsters strange, deformed, surreal, revolving here upon the wheel. I have no need of surpliced priest, for though I watch each prancing beast that hell's menageries released, I do not need a surplus priest. The fabulous fantastic wheel turns and turns to still reveal monsters strange, deformed, surreal, revolving here upon the wheel. I will pass by the mouth of hell. I will not ride this carousel. I will not heed the tolling bell. I will pass by the mouth of hell. Streetwise. It's a small town in a bottle, in an everlasting twilight, never quite escaping daytime, never stepping into night. All the people have deserted their positions and their posts, and the sidewalks and the storefronts have been left to twilight ghosts. The horologist stepped out of his allotted time and place, the clocks he left behind him fully wound and keeping pace. The apothecary's gone from his powders and his potions, from his pills and panaceas, from his liniments and lotions. The barber's chair stands empty, the porcelain is clean, no bloodstains mar the razor, the shop remains pristine. The fire truck's gleaming pumps are polished up like gold. The firehouse dog is sleeping, the fire bell's never tolled. In the sheriff's office stands the head of Joachim, pickled in a jar, looking shriveled, old and grim. The picket fence surrounds the house at Main Street's end, and the visitor with half-closed eyes can silently pretend that the past is trapped in amber, and this is somehow real, not a fantasy of history designed solely to conceal. Small Leviathan. Carved on the tooth of a whale, a tiny perfect evocation of the Leviathan. Minute whaling ships surround it, and smaller still, deck-bound harpoonists have their arms back, trapped in the moment, before the motion, before the battle, with the beast, whose tooth begins the tale anew. The Mikado and the Unseen Orchestra. It begins. The faint tinkling of prayer bells. Mannequin eyes move in motionless faces. Gongs sound, strings vibrate. The woo man and the peeper join the mix. A crescendo builds, a rising cascade of sound and fury, the Mikado. It begins, the slow-drawn bow on violin strings, mechanical movements by unseen hands, cello and viola, timpani and piano join the mix, an emergent symphony of melody, the Unseen Orchestra. Come down deep in the house on the rock, where the darkness holds sway, devils mock, and it seems that your escape is now blocked. Come down deep in the house on the rock. Inferno. These monstrous engines drive the world, the boilers, shafts, propellers, cogs, the pistons, blocks, the pits of flame. Around these loathsome shapes are curled the paths where sinners creep like dogs, stripped of dignity, of pride, of name. This inferno is the engine room, the very base of base desire, the foundry where all sin is made and loose to call all men to doom, and eternity within this fire. Here are weaknesses displayed. And yet, even hell must have light and shade. Without virtue there can be no sin, and so the engines sometimes pause and fade, and still for a moment their clamorous din. So, as the engines fall silent one by one, then the void is filled with voices wailing. And when the tumult is for an instant gone, it might seem that even hell is failing. But then, the hum begins again, the shafts resume their turning, and the sound of mighty organs accompanies the burning. There is thunder in the darkness, and inferno in the whole. There is everlasting pain in every corner of the soul. Move up through the house on the rock. Follow the sound of the bleat of the flock. Listen again for time's ticking clock. Move up through the house on the rock. The doll's carousel. Oh, mother, aren't they a dream? I hear a child whisper. I do not agree. This carousel of dolls makes me scream, as all the frozen fleshless faces, the eyes that do not see, follow without moving, fixed on me. I feel my flesh creep and die. Oh, look at that tiny one, divine. Such gorgeous clothes, so petite, so sweet. It isn't sweet, I can't define the way they make me feel. Their rank and file, perfect, neat, an undead plastic army of incomplete, soulless homunculi. Step out of the house on the rock, and back to the world of the clock, where time flows once more, tick and tock, step out of the house on the rock. Dragons in daylight. I have escaped into morning, but even now in daylight I still see the dragons that haunted my darkness. Dream of the house on the rock, of all that was seen and all that was not, of all you recalled and all you forgot. Dream evermore of the house on the rock. Coda, things I never saw. I have walked inside a stranger's mind and seen the flotsam left behind as the tides of sanity receded from the shore. I have felt the things a stranger felt, played the hand that he was dealt. Was this a simple game of chance? Was it nothing more? I never saw the circus clowns. I saw no sceptres, saw no crowns. I never saw the planes or cars, the butterflies and killing jars. I heard no music boxes play. They must await another day, for if I could look for evermore, there would be things I never saw. And that's the end. That's the entire sequence of poems that I wrote for the House on the Rock. I hope you enjoyed the poems and the pictures.